Hello! Today's video is entitled My Experience with the Electro-harmonix Bass Soul Food. So here we go. There it is. I'll give you a look at the various knobs. Of course, you can all find this on the internet with no problem somewhere else. But I'm just going to walk you through it a little bit and give you my own point of view of my experience with this pedal. So, what is the motivation for having a pedal like this? Well, basically, if you take, for example, a neutral DI bass that you plug into your audio interface, if you've never recorded bass before, it sounds not so inspiring, but hey, vaguely like a bass. And you start mixing, and what happens when you start mixing? Well, after a while you have bass, sounds muddy as hell, and you can't hear your bass in the mix at all. If you start putting in tons of guitars and tons of vocals and tons of keyboards and whatever on top, you got your drums, your percussion, whatever. So, what have audio engineers done, and musicians of course too, to resolve this problem? Well, you add harmonic distortion, which is what used to be added on consoles through transformers and tape and all these analog devices. Tend to add what's called distortion, or saturation if you will, which is basically adding more harmonics, adding more higher frequency overtones to a signal. And engineers and musicians use this on every instrument all the time, but it's particularly important on bass if you want the bass to be heard or present in the mix. Sometimes there are mixes where you just don't care, where you just want the bass to take a back seat, sit down and shut up and do your job. But sometimes, if you're the Red Hot Chili Peppers, you gotta hear that bass. And, of course that's not the only example. And in that case, you're gonna need a buttload of saturation or distortion or something, depending on how busy your music is. For the Red Hot Chili Peppers, it's not that big a deal because all they got going on is often it's pretty bare bones, one guitar, one vocal, which is kind of cool actually. But if you have more than that going on, you have two heavy metal guitarists or something like that, and you still want to hear the bass, of course you got to make intelligent decisions on your mix beforehand about what you want to hear, otherwise it's just going to turn into a mess. But if you decided that it's really important to hear the bass and you're going to put on a bunch of layers on your song, well then you really need some kind of harmonic distortion. And of course you can go the route of plugins. You can go the route of there are tons of modeling plugins out there, and to me they all sound pretty crappy, and I guess, people are excited about how much better they're getting and whatever, and if that's your thing, go for it. You don't need a pedal like this, If all you're gonna do is record and you love the sound, that modern sound of, modeling plugins, then no need, on your guitar emulation or your bass emulation cab, you just pull up a pedal like this. So you don't need a physical one. But I'm kind of an old school type guy, so no matter how much they hype it, no matter how much they, I have the Waves GTR plugin, and I have IK Multimedia, what the hell is the name of that guitar plugin bundle that I think is part of it is free. I've tried it out, and every single time I compare it to actually recording a bass cab or actually recording a guitar cab, I'm just like, this sounds like garbage. So, you know, I'm sure they have better. Some rave about the 11 rack, and hey man, I'm not against you if that's your thing, not at all, but I'm just telling you straight out what's my thing and why I have pedals like this, real analog pedals. So, getting to the point, if you're new to recording and you want to put together, you know, a song that has bass in it, and then guitar in it, and then keyboards in it, and then vocals in it, and a bunch of stuff, and you want to hear your bass a bit in the mix, well, you gotta add some distortion or saturation to your bass. And that's where this pedal comes in. Now, there are different, lots of different pedals out there now. And I looked into them before buying this one. Lots of different prices. There's the new line of like luxury pedals that are like, you know, 300 euros or whatever, and so I looked into those and did a lot of listening, and I kind of settled on this mid price. It's kind of what I would consider a mid or maybe mid to low price pedal. But the one thing you want to look for, even if you don't like this pedal in particular, is you want, on a bass pedal, you want the blend knob. The blend knob is very important, and here's why. Because when you add distortion to your bass, as I explained before, you're going to get more high frequency harmonics, which essentially means overall you're going to lose bass. Meaning that percentage-wise, there's going to be less lower frequencies in your signal, in the final signal after you've gone through the distortion or the saturation. And so, that can lead to a situation where the distortion sounds really nice and sizzly, and you can hear it in your mix, but there's no bass left. There's no oomph at all. So in order to solve that problem, you want your blend knob. This is the blend knob, yeah. You want your blend knob. And what does the blend knob do? Sometimes it's called a mix or something else. It basically decides how much of the signal is the original signal and how much of the signal is the signal with the effect on it. This is an overdrive pedal, so overdrive, right? How much of your signal is affected by the overdrive, and you can retain some of the original signal. So that way, you get some sizzle, but it doesn't take away all, or of course, all is an exaggeration, but it doesn't take away too much of your bass frequencies that you need to support your mix. So there you go. If you're looking for a bass pedal or even a modeling plug-in of a bass pedal, you need the blend knob. Well, there are other ways around that too. You can do parallel tracks, right? That's another thing you can do when you're recording bass. And so the way I use this pedal, I always grab a DI actually. I always grab a DI. And I always record the bass amp. And then, this does not have a DI, by the way. This is just a straight in-out pedal. Was that in-out? Well, it's the opposite. In-out. Anyway, some of these fancier bass pedals have a DI included, which is pretty practical if you don't already have a DI. See, the thing is, I already had a DI, and I'm gonna talk about that piece of gear in a different video at some point. So, what I tend to do personally, how I use this pedal, is with my DI, which basically splits the signal into two. It allows you to go out with a 1/4" jack, and then it gives you another version of the signal with an XLR jack. And so what I do personally with this pedal is, what I found best, is to use, because it has the blend knob, I can plug my electric bass right into this pedal and then send that into the DI. So I have overdrive on both the amp signal and on the DI signal. And I can decide the amount of bass that I want to keep in my signal with the blend knob. That is the way that works best for me, because I feel like if I don't put this pedal on my DI signal, that pretty much sounds like garbage. And then you get tempted, like I said, to use some sort of modeling software on it, and that's not my cup of tea, as I told you. So it is kind of cool to have a separate DI and an overdrive pedal, because then you can decide, because maybe you won't like it like me, you can decide, for example, to only overdrive the DI signal if you have some effects on your amp, or you can decide to only overdrive the amp signal if you want to keep your DI clean, or you can decide, like I almost always do now, to put the overdrive on both. Right? There's an added flexibility in having a separate DI and a separate pedal. But anyway, maybe some of the pedals these days, if you look into all the details that have a DI, they may even allow you to select those things. I don't know. When I looked at the time, I didn't see that. So, to get to the point about this pedal in particular, I think it's pretty good. I'm not looking any further at this point. It gives you a nice, classic, old-style overdrive. That's what it does for you. So, if you're a metal guy, don't get this pedal. You want some sort of crazy, over-the-top distortion, this pedal is not for you. This pedal is for you if you like classic vintage type sounds, where you can, like, you know, if you listen to what all the old, you know, the 70s music recordings, where, you know, whatever, the Beatles, Rolling Stones, whatever, take your pick of what you like in the 70s. They all have that bass that in most songs really sticks out, really punches, really gets attention without being over the top. And, well, how did they do that? Well, of course, you know, they used tube amps and captured it on tape and et cetera, et cetera. Well, you know, these days, most of us don't have those things. So you need to generate that harmonic distortion somehow in order to hear your bass in the mix. So, once again, this is just classic, think like 70s music. If you want, you know, your bass to sound like 70s music. This, I'm not guaranteeing that it's any particular style or whatever, you know, but it's kind of a generic, nice bass presence in your mix if you have, you know, like I do, mixes that are more like, you know, I don't know if you'd call it like pop rock or indie rock, or some of my recordings are more sort of like folk, some of them are more towards like classic rock, just depends. But this pedal will give you enough presence, no problem, for all of that type of music. If you need to push it further, like I said, with metal or modern rock or styles like that, then you're going to need a pedal that gives you, you know, heavier and more intense distortion. So let's go over the controls that are on this pedal. So we have a volume knob, which allows us to basically set the output level of the pedal, and then we also have a switch that's basically so that it's a 0 dB or minus 10 dB switch. So it's kind of like a pad that you can use to adjust the input level of the pedal in the case that you're either using a passive bass or a active bass pickup, which is quite nice because I have an electric bass with active pickups and I have an electric bass with passive pickups, so it's nice to be able to go back and forth and use that, because obviously active pickups on electric bass are almost always louder, quite a bit louder than passive pickups. So it's nice to have that little option. Along with the volume knob, you've got the drive, which sets the amount of harmonic distortion that's that you're using. And you know, here is pretty typical, since the distortion on this is not radical, as I said before. So, you know, I have the drive knob at what, 2 o'clock or something on there. It's about where I usually have it, about 2/3 of the way. 2/3 of the way up for my recordings. Anywhere between 1/2 and 3/4 of the way up works pretty well for me. And then, as I said, you need to set your blend knob, which I tend to have. It's only about 1/3 of the way up, meaning that I'm using 1/3 of the signal is being affected by the overdrive, and the other 2/3 are left as they came out of the bass. So that's how I tend to use it. And then last we have the treble knob. And what does that do? Well, it gives a, if you know what a, it's not a band, it basically gives you a boost in a certain band of frequencies. And if you have it right in the middle, it's basically neutral. And if you move it to the right, I think the setting by default is 1 kilohertz, which is basically right in the middle of the audio spectrum. And so if you move this so-called treble knob to the right, then it'll up that frequency that's being boosted to 2 kilohertz, etc., the higher you make it. And if you make it lower, well, then it's going to start going down to 800 hertz or 500 hertz, which just tends to be muddy. So most often I just leave it neutral at 1 kilohertz, which is, you know, if you've ever mixed bass, it's kind of a nice area in which to boost bass, around 800 hertz, some mixers say, or, you know, 1 kilohertz is not too much higher than that. In certain songs, if you want the bass to have a little bit more hair on it, but it can get kind of, you know, a little too strong quickly, depending on the mix, you can boost the a little bit higher up, like 2 kilohertz or something like that, but I don't usually change it too much. And to be honest, I usually low pass filter my bass at around 5 kilohertz or something like that anyway, so boosting above that is just pretty much, well, you can still hear it if you do it, but it doesn't give you too much, you know. Well, I didn't say it, but of course it has the can stomp on the pedal to engage it, and it has an LED to indicate if it's on or not. And of course, this type of pedal is very nice. I mostly record, but if you play bass in concert and you're with like a 70s style group or indie rock group or whatever, I think this would be a really cool pedal for you. Again, it's not for you metal guys. Have we said everything that can be said about this pedal? It does luckily come with a AC adapter, or you can use 9-volt batteries. So I noticed that with even some of the luxury pedals. Oh my goodness, I can't believe that somebody's willing to pay 300 euros for some sort of luxury pedal and they don't even allow you to use batteries. for ecological reasons, they say, of course, but that's pretty cheap. So I've seen most of the pedals still, you know, allow both, but just to say it, it does come with an AC adapter by default. You don't have to buy it on top. And if you want, you can use 9-volt batteries instead, which is nice. It's nice to have both those options. So there you go. I think that's all I have to say on the electro-harmonix bass soul food pedal. Cool. If you enjoyed the video, please like. If you'd like to see more videos like this, please subscribe to my channel. And yeah, if you have something to say about the video, then leave a comment below. As I've been trying to do, I forgot to mention it in the beginning of the video, but it seems like YouTube won't allow us to make chapters like on the screen anymore, which kind of sucks. They used to call that annotations. So I have to make chapters in the comments. And if you're on your phone or something like that, well, you probably don't see the comment section. I don't know. But I know I tend to ramble on for a rather long time sometimes, and I have a hard time getting to the point, but that's just the way I am. And so what I've started doing is making little, you know, you can make chapters with the different times in the video that I'm talking about different subjects in the comment section, so that, you know, if you want to skip to this topic or that topic, then you can just click in the comment section. Cool. Bye-bye.